Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Not true to my character, I'm going to go to Ben pretty quickly and get started because these are busy individuals who have a lot to get done today and every day, and I want to be mindful and respectful of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Governor, and on behalf of our governor, it's my privilege to welcome you here this morning and thank you for joining us. My name is Benjamin Baker. I serve as the governor's public safety advisor, and I'm very grateful for your attendance and to be able to serve you here today. We're going to discuss topics critical to New Mexico's public safety future. In the interim, the governor's office and I spent time on the road. We visited over 12 New Mexico communities and spent time with the residents, learning about the things that they're experiencing in their communities. This is public safety and crime. During this process, one couldn't help but see the emerging themes to the forefront. Irrespective of where we visited, communities large and small, we've heard from New Mexicans concerned about increased crime, concerned about a perception of lack of accountability for people who commit violence within their communities, and for what they view as a revolving door that we deal with systematically. One particularly disturbing theme that stood out was the intersection point of violent gun crime in our state's youngest people. Yes, in every town we visited, youth gun violence was front and center topic. A consistent theme also learned about is the exigent need to address competency and commitment in this year's session. We're grateful to Chair Chandler and her committee's hard work and all of the legislature's hard work during the interim on these critical topics. Today we're going to share some concerns, thoughts, and legislative solutions to address these critical problems which we face in our state. I'm going to introduce the panelists so that we all know who we're talking to, and then we're going to go on with some brief presentations.
It sounds very formal that we're all now panelists.
That's right,
okay.
that's right. all these esteemed leaders in New Mexico in front of us. Starting with Senator Brandt, Senator Maestas. Thank you for being here. Representative Chandler, Reeb. We may be joined by Representative De La Cruz in progress, so we'll prepare for his arrival and welcome him in advance. We thank you for joining us and taking time out of your busy legislative work. Also, welcome and thank you to 2nd Judicial District Attorney Sam Bregman, APD Deputy Chief Josh Brown, thank you very much for being here. Johan Jareño, who is the Undersheriff of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, and seated directly to my left, Cabinet Secretary Jason Bowie of DPS and New Mexico State Police Chief Troy Wiesler. Without any further delay, so that we can get to the substance, it is my honor to have the Governor offer a few framework remarks, and then we'll move on to the presentations.
So interestingly enough, I'm not going to do the substance because frankly we've been talking about it for years with a real productive focus on the last 6 to 8 months. What came to light immediately is none of us, including my office, were really looking at the data about what was happening both in our communities, in our streets, and without the right tools in our judicial system. We've got bills, which we're not going to talk about today, that deal with some of those data inadequacies. I got 2 million lines of code 6 months ago from the Administrative Office of the Courts. Not a complaint, just their system is antiquated, which means no one's looking at data. Here's what we now know today. Since 2017, more than 18,000 criminal cases have been dismissed because of competency. 18,000. What we also know is that too often after that dismissal, there isn't a structure to support that effort, whatever it is. So restoring competency, getting treatment, if there needs to be a commitment, none of that really occurs. That means that these individuals end up on our streets. To put that in perspective, 1,500 plus of those individuals repeat crime, violent crime, and felonies over and over and over again because this intersection isn't corrected. I also want to highlight that in this data and with the public health order that we now have an agreement that we're all maintaining those strategies without a required public health order in Bernalillo County, we weren't able with this system as it is to detain a dangerous juvenile offender. So by agreement, through the initiation of a public health order, we now detain them. 343 juveniles in that year and a few months for violent gun crimes To put that in perspective, that means that we have a juvenile in the system with a violent gun crime 2 days out of every 3. My opinion, and it's, again, doesn't shared by everyone on every solution. There's lots of them, and so we're gonna debate them vigorously in this session. Felons in possession of firearms. Those firearms readily get into the hands of juveniles, readily. And these individuals out with a firearm reoffend immediately, and people die. Police officers die. Our families are victimized by these same individuals over and over and over again. I think they need to be incarcerated longer. And so we have common sense solutions, dealing with competency, dealing with commitment, creating a behavioral health system that can wrap around and capture any number of these supportive services, and the tools for jurisdictions, policing jurisdictions, to also hold people accountable. Lastly, and this is difficult, but harsh. The notion is with informal services, and you're not competent, that your drug addiction or your mental health issue, that people will work towards getting well. I have yet to see that occur in any community in the state. In fact, the data suggests pretty unequivocally, rarely, if ever, do they get the help or stay in a treatment program so that they can be fairly supported and get out of this revolving door crisis. And in fact, this morning at the Archdiocese breakfast, I stood up and went outside to talk to an unhoused man. This individual named Mario, I think has a disability. I don't know about a mental health issue, seemed very anxious and nervous. And the first thing I always ask, how can I help you? What can I do? What can I do for you? How about if we start with breakfast? He will take on average months. We're already there. I sent someone to the Salvation Army. It'll take me months to get him to agree to a small thing, right? It takes months. This is not the person. Not dangerous, I have no indication, is a felon, has intersected with any criminality. We build a robust system, we can do better, faster, more productive work for Mario. Dangerous, repeat, violent offenders have to have these interventions. These are common sense solutions. And with that, I'm very grateful for the bipartisan, very effective, incredible work by so many legislators who are working to do both, and then I'm done. Invest in the prevention and the compassionate, supportive treatment. We aren't going to vilify poverty or mental health issues, but we aren't going to tolerate a revolving door of criminality anywhere in the state. We can do both. So I believe in this session we will. Thank you very much, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Madam Governor. I appreciate it. I will now turn it over to Chair Chandler to share some of her thoughts related to competency, commitment, her interim committee's work, and her leadership. Madam?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Governor. It's been great to be working with you and your staff and my colleagues in the legislature. So you will all be hearing about our competency bill that's going to be in hearing, our first hearing today. I feel confident that it's the right approach to address the concerns that we've all been talking about over the summer. You'll recall CCJ worked diligently over several months, talking with experts, hearing from law enforcement, working with prosecutors, talking with the public defenders and so on, and I believe the bill strikes an appropriate balance. On the one hand, it addresses violent felons who are determined to be not competent, and it enhances opportunities to achieve potentially competency, and if not, provide for criminal commitment, so that those individuals who are dangerous, and I must underscore, this all has to do with a dangerous person who's charged with a crime, a particular crime. Those issues will be addressed, and I think we've enhanced the tools in the bill to do that. Okay. But there are also other individuals who are charged with crimes that the governor was referring to, who have not been addressed in any appropriate way. So it's correct to say that those individuals simply get released if they are not deemed competent and they do not get any services. And I think that's a heartbreaking thing that we all as a society in this state should be addressing, and I'm glad that this bill does that. And what it does is, currently there is no avenue for what we call restoration, working with the individual so that they are in a position to be able to participate in their own defense. So this bill expands that potential for that opportunity by allowing for community-based outpatient restoration, which is not currently in the law. If the court deems that is not an appropriate avenue, there are other avenues. We're allowing now a district attorney to be an eligible party to refer these individuals to assisted outpatient treatment. So if that person qualifies under that program, which is a civil program, it's not a criminal program, we will be getting that person into treatment. And I think that's a very important goal, and that too will support our efforts to improve public safety in the state. Because I agree that a number of these issues have to do with individuals who have serious mental health problems, and we need to start supporting those folks, getting to the underlying reasons for the crime. And lastly, it also focuses, and this is in current law, it permits district attorneys to refer individuals through civil commitment. And those individuals would be people who perhaps don't qualify for criminal commitment, but they do either present a danger to themselves or others, and in those cases, we are maintaining that opportunity for district attorneys and others to allow that person to get treatment in a locked facility. I feel this bill strikes an appropriate balance with looking at dangerousness and focusing to make sure those individuals are not let out on the street, but also providing treatment opportunities, enhanced treatment opportunities for individuals who are not competent but are charged with relatively low-level crimes. So we try to break the cycle of the revolving door. So I'll turn it back to you, Governor.
Thank you very much, and Chairwoman, it's great work, and thank you for leaning in to try to figure out the most appropriate tool.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Governor. Next, we'll turn it over to DA Bregman and our law enforcement partners from Bernalillo County for some brief updates and summaries of just some of the things that we are facing in some of our communities and some of the challenges that exist under the current construct and why these changes are so necessary. DA?
Governor, thank you for your leadership on crime. Thank you. And Madam Chair and legislators, thank you. I know how hard your job is, and I really appreciate the effort that you all put in every day up here. I want you to say basically, as a whole, crime is starting to get better as far as what I see. However, I want to make this as clear as possible. Violent juvenile crime is out of control. And if you don't believe me, just look at some very basic data. Right now in the detention center in Bernalillo County, there are 25 juveniles with murder charges. That's from all over the state. 19 of them are from Bernalillo County. I want to just give you some examples, and I truly believe, and that's why I've recommended a change to the Children's Code, of building in some consequences. I do not believe currently we have juveniles that face serious consequences when they first get in the juvenile system. I think that needs to change. And I'll give you an example. Because they face no consequences, sometimes the first consequence they see is when we're sentencing them to life in prison for first-degree murder. Anthony Williams, example number one. Anthony Williams faced his first criminal charge when he was 13 years old. When he was 17 years old, he was charged with first-degree murder on a triple homicide in Valencia County. He was released from custody after 7 months of incarceration after a plea in which he admitted to killing all 3 of those individuals. He recently shot an officer and then was later killed in return fire from the officers. Jacob Lovato, 17 years old when he first entered the criminal justice system, for battery on a peace officer and unlawful possession of a firearm for a person under 19. December 2024, Lovato pled guilty to first-degree murder. First-degree murder for the shooting death of Gabriel Goulet in April of 2023. I'm going to move on to Cruz Medina. I personally prosecuted this case with Jolana Macias in my office, and I want you to know that Cruz Medina, when he was 14 years old, he's been in the criminal justice system since he's been 14 years old. Since then, he's been charged with multiple crimes, including armed robbery, unlawful carrying of a handgun by a person under the age of 19, possession of stolen vehicles, aggravated assault, shooting at or from a motor vehicle or dwelling, and first-degree murder. In January of 2025, Medina was sentenced, just last week, was sentenced to 24 years for first-degree murder because he went to a house party, was kicked out of the house party, had a gun on him, and they kicked him out of the house party, turned around with a couple other juveniles and shot up the house, and a bullet went through 2 walls of Jada Gonzalez. The bullet went into her femoral artery, and she died in her own blood, in a pool of her own blood. So he'll be doing 24 years. Now the question is, I'll give you one more. Jeremy Salazar, March of 2024, Jeremy Salazar entered the criminal justice system for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, battery on a household member, and criminal damage to property. The state asked, despite objecting to it, the court gave probation, and he was let out. In November of 2024, Salazar was charged with second-degree murder in San Miguel County. Too much of this happens. When I look at the law enforcement surrounding this table, nobody's surprised by this because this happens. Juveniles without consequences who later commit murder or violent crimes happens every single week in Bernalillo County. It's out of control. And so I have made a suggestion, and I know it's supported by Maine law enforcement, and I'm grateful to legislators carrying this legislation to make reform to the Children's Code. And when I say that, I mean build in some consequences so that we can at least try, so that at least I think that the general public knows that our legislature is trying to get a handle on this juvenile crime epidemic. Those are a few examples, and I know law enforcement here deals with it every day, but I do not want to see another person shot by another juvenile, just as nobody in this room would want that. But we have to do some things so they learn when they first enter the criminal justice system that their conduct of violating certain laws and norms cannot continue without a consequence. Therefore, they learn it, because we're not, at the end of the day, and I'll conclude with this, at the end of the day, the victim of the crime, Jada, who's no longer with us, her family, who is completely destroyed in every way, and Cruz Medina, the kid that did it, we didn't do him any service either when we didn't give him a consequence and teach him that you can't keep doing this. So I hope that we have a robust discussion about this in the legislature, and I really hope that we can get something done when it comes to juvenile crime. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, DA.
Chief, Sheriff, anything to add related to metro crime that the DA didn't cover?
I'd like to hit it from 2 angles. First, I'd like to thank the Governor's office and everybody around this table for inviting us to this conversation. First perspective is from the officer's perspective. We have a sergeant who got shot. We got a sergeant who got shot by somebody who should have been in prison. If you look at his background and history and the reasons why he was out, it's ridiculous. I'll be honest with it. I don't sugarcoat things, and it is what it is. And the fact that, this is something that our officers kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's the same people, same kids, and lack of consequences that kind of brace those kids up at the end of the day. It leads to just their emboldenment of carrying a gun, shooting a police officer. I know we have had a couple of officer-involved shootings the last couple of weeks and I know Chief Medina and everybody will get a brief on those at a later date, but again, those are all youthful offenders with multiple backgrounds and a ton of history. And so I think if you look at it from officers' perspective, yeah, it's tough. They face a tough job having to go out, pick up the same guys day in and day out, and those kids are right back doing the same thing again. Look at downtown. I went downtown a while back and, kind of seeing what my guys are doing. And there's 12, 14-year-old kids down there running around at 3 o'clock in the morning. I have 2 teenage kids at home. And it scares me to death, the fact that they're faced to go to school, and if they piss off the wrong person, there's consequences for that. My kids know better. And I'm on them every day. And the fact that I gotta put them out there where these kids don't have any consequences to them and put my kids in danger, it's rough. So I look at two different angles. My angle as a father and my angle as a policeman. So appreciate the conversation and let's get some stuff done.
Thank you, Chief.
Sheriff, do you wish to add anything?
No, just show our appreciation, Madam Governor, for having all of us here at the table. And I echo what everybody else is saying. From my personal opinion, this is just my personal opinion, neither one of us can solve this problem by ourselves. And the fact that we keep having this communication and this collaboration is the only way we're gonna get this problem, I wouldn't say solved, I'm a realistic person, but at least under control. Crime and criminals innovate and they adjust to the laws and whatever it may have. So I think that it's only responsible for all of us to come with innovative ways. There's no one solution to the problem. We all need to come with different solutions, attack it from the side of the mental health problem, the crisis problem, poverty problem, homelessness problem, educational problem. It's way too vast of a range of problems to come with one solution. So as long as we keep having the communication and the avenues open for all of us to have this conversation, regardless if we agree or don't agree, I think that we all agree in one thing. There is a problem and we need to come with whatever solution we might have. In my personal opinion, I think that for far too long, we have been focusing on a very small percentage of people in our community who are suspects or criminals, and we have adjusted to them. And I think that there is a time now to adjust to the victims, to those who have been victimized by all these suspects, by all these criminals. The long list that D.A. Bregman, who by the way is by far probably the strongest DA that we've
Okay, come on.
when it comes to crime, that's from my personal opinion and experience. But I think that, as I was saying, we have been adjusting laws and protocols to please a very small group of people, because of some people might have some issues, and even some criminals or some suspects are victims at some point in some way because of mental health or because the way they were raised. But I think that we have tended for far too long to forget about the victims. And as a society, we're all being victimized. So there's a largest amount of people that are being victimized as a society than the small group of people that are committing this crime. So I think that we need to change the tide a little bit and focus on how to hold these people accountable, whichever means necessary, because we're all, most of us, are fathers, as Chief Brown was saying, and we want a better future for all of us as a state.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Chief, for your perspectives. We're going to move now to Senator Brandt to share some thoughts on this upcoming session.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate the invitation and really appreciate the way you and I have been able to work for the last few years on these issues as well as some other issues. You know, the revolving door is one of the issues that we've got to get solved. When officers arrest someone and that person's out before the officer even gets back on shift, we have a problem, especially when they've already got a jacket for being a violent offender. We need to have the tools to be able to keep that person in jail because we know if they've committed one crime, they're going to commit another one. So you need to be able to hold them there, especially if they've already committed a violent crime. You know, some other things, you know, our RICO statute is very weak in New Mexico. I was listening a couple of years ago to the Legislative Finance Committee before I was on it, and the DA's Association presented, and they were talking about we need to fix our RICO statutes. Well, just hearing that, I looked at our Chief of Staff and I said, let's fix it. And so we brought a bill to do that will fix our criminal justice system, our RICO statutes, so we can actually file RICO charges against people instead of having to have the federal government do it. We need to be able to take care of those things ourselves. But when we've got cartels and gangs and organized crime running some of these kids, and a lot of these kids, We need to be able to go after the head of the snake and not just the kids. We need to get the kids, and we need to rehabilitate them, but we need to be able to go after the head of the snake, and that's what this RICO statute will do for us, as well as several other bills that we're working on together, Governor. And I think if we can come with a strong crime package, you know, our officers are doing the best that they can, but when we don't give them the tools, and when we don't give the DAs the tools to keep criminals in jail, what are we expecting? You know, in my town, which has always been a very safe community, Rio Rancho, 2 nights ago, someone kicked in the front door and was shot and killed. Now, I fully support that homeowner that was protecting his children in that home. But crime is all over the state. It's no longer just an Albuquerque problem, and I'm tired of hearing that. It's moved up the hill to Rio Rancho. It's everywhere in this state.
It's everywhere.
And we've got to give the tools to our state police, as well as the tools to every DA in this state, and every police officer in this state, to crack down on crime and get crime under control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Representative Reed.
Thank you, Madam Governor, for having me. I'm actually really excited to be dealing with public safety in a bipartisan fashion this time. Everybody seems to be coming to the table, whether it's competency, whether it's Sam Bregman's great ideas on the juvenile bills. I mean, you're right, it is coming in even to where I'm from, Clovis. I think the last 2 or 3 homicides have been committed by juvenile offenders. And being a prosecutor for 28 years, I understand this code, and I'm happy to collaborate with him and anybody else who is wanting to stiffen up these penalties for juveniles. I also, as a prosecutor, have a sensitive spot for our police officers too, and our law enforcement. And a bill I ran previously that I'm running again is I don't understand why when you shoot a police officer, it's the same penalty as when you shoot somebody that's not a police officer. We've got to protect our law enforcement and raise the penalties up when someone decides to take the chance of shooting a police officer that could kill them. And one thing that also amazes me is our police officers aren't even considered victims that are protected under the Victims Crimes Act. So they don't get notice of hearings necessarily if somebody dies, or if they want to have a statement at their own sentencing of the offender or anything like that, or their family members. And so we need to fix that too. They're victims in every form and fashion when something happens to them, and so I'm hoping that is also something we can do for law enforcement. But I'm ready to assist. I know we're not going to agree on everything, but public safety is something I feel very strongly about, and I appreciate, Governor, you letting me have a place at the table and working with me and letting me help you try to pass some of these also. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Maestas.
Thank you, Ben. Madam Governor, thank you so much. DA Bregman, Mr. Secretary, Chiefs. I want to thank the Governor for lighting a fire under all of us this past spring and summer, that we all need to come to the table with the best and brightest ideas and sift through them these next 60 days. Representative Reeb and I are the only former prosecutors in the entire legislature. So I was inspired to put pen to paper and try to contribute to increasing public safety here in the state. I'm going to have about 10 bills. One is a victim rights rewrite, which you'll hear about next week, but 6 of the bills have been introduced. I just want to gloss over them real quick. What you got to understand, criminal law is centuries old and based on fundamental criminal law principles. I believe we can stay true to those principles, but yet be open-minded and creative to modernize our criminal laws as it relates to competency issues, civil commitments, and the Children's Code. We need to amend these laws to deal with the realities of the modern world. So I look forward to that. But Senate Bill 32, the way the Supreme Court interprets the Second Amendment inhibits our ability to regulate firearms, but we can still do a lot. And so Senate Bill 32 is the crime of unlawful possession of a stolen firearm, in which it's a specific distinct crime. Right now, we prosecute based on the market value of stolen goods, and this will this will specify a stolen firearm as a distinct crime. We keep stats as well as punish appropriately. Shooting from a motor vehicle, we want to clean up that statute with Senate Bill 35. It is unacceptable. One of the most dangerous and antisocial things a criminal can do is shoot from a motor vehicle. It was, invented, a decade or two after the automobile was created, and it prompted the federal government to outlaw Tommy guns back in the day. So it was considered a horribly heinous crime. So we want to make it a second-degree penalty regardless of whether someone was hit or not, to have swift and certain justice with regards to shooting from a motor vehicle. And I think as a state, we can, all sectors of society can suggest that is unacceptable, and that should never ever happen again. And then a couple others that aren't the sexiest, but I think move the needle. Senate Bill 40 was brought to me by officers from APD to mandate interlocks in all driving on a revoked. If you get convicted of DWI, you have a mandatory interlock. Now, if you get convicted of driving on a revoked, because you had a prior DWI, you have that mandatory interlock that will be monitored by the courts, as well as utilizing the interlock fund to fund indigent persons and get interlocks in motor vehicles. And then a couple others, Madam Governor, Senate Bill 153, the Home Invasion Act, to go into a home when someone is there is a horrible experience for those homeowners. You should feel safe and secure in your homes at all times. And this creates the crime of home invasion, which is similar to aggravated burglary, but it's distinct because it doesn't require certain elements that aggravated burglary would require. And then Senate Bill 155, helping prosecutors convict folks for embezzlement. You calculate the embezzlement in the aggregate, makes it easier for investigations and prosecutions to occur. And then also, Senate Bill 154 is on moving violations. You can't drive down I-40 without seeing two folks racing or driving crazy. Now, because folks don't pay court costs, because we took away those fees and we pay for these programs in House Bill 2, they don't pay court costs, and then many times they're on Zoom. So there's not that component of accountability for a moving violation, and this would ensure that they are fined, that they get dinged on their insurance, and there are consequences for driving crazy here in New Mexico. Anyway, thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Governor.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, legislative body, for leadership and the hard work putting these things together, in some cases for years, but having the tenacity to continue to bring them back. Thank you to the governor for the willingness to bring together these groups. I'm going to close with Secretary Boyd if he has any closing thoughts, and then we're going to have the Gov say a couple of brief closing words, then we're going to open up to a brief Q&A for the media present, because obviously these legislators are needed on the floor to do their work to pass these bills. So, Secretary Boyd, a few quick words?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Governor. I guess what I would leave with is first, thank you for all the legislative support, and it's really nice to see all these bills coming across in support of this issue. We talked about this a little bit in our press conference not too long ago, but most citizens still believe that there's consequences for committing felonies. Right? Committing a felony, there's a law on the books that tells you how many days you would spend in jail if committing those. But we really sent the message that really no longer pertains in the state of New Mexico. People reoffend and reoffend and reoffend, and they're released. And so we didn't consult about what our remarks would be. My remarks were just the same. It's about the consequences, and we've sent a clear message to those who would commit crime that there really are no consequences for it. And so, our people who commit violence against their communities, they reoffend over and again, because we have demonstrated that even for low-level crimes, there's no consequence, and so they get more emboldened. They start resisting arrest. The encounters become more violent with law enforcement, and anyone who would commit violence against our law enforcement officer is a significant risk to the public. And so, at the end of the day, we were undermining the rule of law every time we make a decision to release these people. Our public trust is declining. People in our communities don't feel safe. I don't feel any safer I live in the Albuquerque metro area, any safer than I did 20 years ago. It's worse. And I think most people are feeling that way. It's the message that we got in every corner within New Mexico and all of our town halls and then speaking with people. And so, something absolutely needs to be done. And so I'm very appreciative of everyone coming to the table. Thankful for the discussion as well. We look forward to doing a lot of good work. So, thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Madam Governor, a few closing words before we go to Q&A?
Yes, and thank you. And I'll be brief again, which is shocking. Not because I think that I delight in that. There's just a lot to talk about improving the quality of life and getting our arms around a pretty broad public safety crisis. And so I'd like to do just 3 quick things. One, we're not the only state that has tried to figure out what these balances are. And New Mexico is, we're pretty courageous. And so when we lean in hard, but typically in one direction. So you see this pretty dramatic pendulum swing. And I think that we are seeing the consequences of that. It is not purposeful, but that is what has occurred. So it's all prevention. It's recognizing that we don't want kids to have their lives ruined because a 17-year-old convinced a 13-year-old that joyriding and racing and learning about a firearm is fun. And we don't want that. But if there are no consequences, then we have a problem on the other end. And I will tell you unequivocally that adult bad actors have a recruitment tool in juveniles for violent crime because they tell them nothing's going to happen to you. You have no risk here. I'm going to pay you. You get to be the big man or woman on campus. I'm going to give you this gun. And they do it because they believe, and we have demonstrated, not by design, but we're in a climate where we've allowed that to happen. KOB, thank you, ran a very interesting set of stories about juvenile justice and crime, and we also use data, second thing, in a very odd way because we don't collect it and really think about it in ways that we need to. And I mean, no disrespect, but these guys and these men and women will tell you they didn't share data until you had a short, mean governor who said that if you don't, I won't give you a raise. There are powerful tools, or I won't give you a helicopter. Whatever it is, because it can interfere with objective investigations. That's a powerful response, but we can do both. We can make sure that we have independent, secure investigations. We can cooperate among jurisdictions. We can do ballistics. We can share data. And so the data that we were describing, yeah, the national data is if you put a juvenile in a serious detention, there are gangs in there, there are bad people in there, and you can have consequences. What they didn't talk about is that if you can do productive interventions that are the right balance to the chairwoman's, thank you. It's about that balance. Consequences, accountability, restoration. You can have all 3. If you don't, you are choosing a decline in one of those areas. No detention means we have more juvenile crime. Now we have life in prison when they're 18. Too many consequences, no restoration means that we're creating more criminal behaviors in that soon-to-be released adult. We have to stop talking about them in a vacuum. You have to do all of it. We must do all of it. And lastly, what's really amazing and wonderful is it is bipartisan. There are going to be lots of bills, which means these discussions will be robust in nearly every committee. I think that's very useful to get to that middle balance about doing right by New Mexicans. And I thank the legislature for that. That's no easy trick because, we want everything and we have a responsibility to address everything. But 2, the thing that we haven't talked about is that people don't feel safe. That creates its own set of real risks in our neighborhoods and with our families and communities. And I just did something that I'm a bit ashamed of, but I was scared. I don't go to movie theaters. Why? You can just stream it. It's $1.99. But it's a treat. I got grandkids. I wanted to take them to a Disney movie, and we wanted the whole thing, the French fries, the nachos. I might have wanted a beer. Right, all the stuff that you can do. And we were here in Santa Fe, and there were 2 kids. I don't know how old they were. I'm going to make it up because why would I know? But 2 hooded teenagers, looks to me. I don't know whether with girls or boys. And they were in 2 rows in front of me. My officers often sit away from me because I want to enjoy my grandkids. And I don't know if you've met your officers, they're killjoys. Just beer. These teenagers were texting in a way that wasn't about disturbing in the movie. It scared me. I felt like they were getting messages. I'm beginning to have a movie in my own head. Then they stand. Then they turn and face the audience. I'm getting so nervous that these kids are being dared to shoot up the movie theater or to do something. And I immediately start to panic about the safety of my grandchildren. So I'm now trying to text the officers, we gotta get out of here, we gotta get out of here. Nothing happened. These teenagers left. Maybe their parents said, you're not allowed to be at that theater, you're grounded, you better get out. They were looking around for their parents, completely innocent. Maybe their ride was there. Maybe, who knows? But I immediately went to the darkest place you could go. We don't need that risk. I don't need New Mexicans like me having a panic attack over normal behavior because we are all on edge, because the risks are real. We do have teenagers that have shot up the movie theater. I have teenagers who are shooting out of their cars, and nearly every day that I go to Albuquerque, I want to do a citizen's arrest for the people who are speeding and passing us at 120 miles an hour. I literally yell out, citizen's arrest, and they don't do it. They pay no attention. I do make them call the license plate every time, and they do. I don't think I need to tell them to do that. I think they do that. We have to reduce these risks in every context. We have a constitutional right to feel safe in our homes, in our churches, in our schools, in our neighborhoods. And we have to have the right balance of consequences and interventions and prevention. And this is the session to do it all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. Coleman, would you like to moderate a brief Q&A?
You got it. Let's start with Morgan Lee from the Associated Press. Hello, thanks for this opportunity. Madam Governor, I wonder if you could rewind briefly to your encounter with Mario outside Memphis Guadalupe Church. And just to explain, you say people aren't seeking treatment, that they might be compelled in some instances. Can you say how that might work?
Yeah, I mean,
under your vision?
I was at the Archdiocese breakfast this morning, and from my vantage point, I could see folks coming out from the river area, either walking or coming right up. There were two individuals, but one stopped at the church, and I got a sense based on the conversation that he stops there often, which is also a nice thing. And we want these human contacts, they're important. And I often, so I promise, that had nothing to do with legislators, I need to know what's happening out there. What can I do better? And so I got up and went outside. And his name is Mario. He was anxious, so he didn't get too close to me. I also disclosed that I have a cold, and he may not want to be too close, but I'm taking antibiotics, so I'm good. And here's what I learned. I asked, the first question I always ask is there anything I could do for you? My name is Michelle. And no one's in any trouble, and I'd love to help if I could. Is there anything? Are you hungry? He said he was going to the Salvation Army. I said, well, they'll give you, a good cup of coffee. I can give you a burrito and a huevos rancheros right here. So we did that. He then got a little closer to me, gave me his name. I said, do you need housing or health care, or is there anything at all? What could I do? He showed me that his hands have been injured. He's missing from his knuckle up his fingers. Thumbs were intact. He said he lost them working in slaughterhouses around the country. And he's interested in income stability. I asked him if there was anything else we could do while he was living on the streets, not as an accusation. I'm actually fairly good at this, Morgan. And so, can I do something about that? He said maybe. More, 100% of the time, they say no, I don't need anything. Or they'll give me kind of a sense about who they are. It takes me months. My guess, this is a guess, I didn't see any indications that he was not sober. I didn't see any indications of, and I'm not a professional, of significant mental illness. Suffers from anxiety, probably other PTSD issues would be my guess if a professional were evaluating. He certainly doesn't trust anyone, trust the guy at the church. They all have my phone number now. I sent people to the Salvation Army, And we're gonna work on getting him disability if he qualifies, or Medicare if he qualifies, and if he doesn't, again, my prediction is it will take me months to get him to agree to let him help us. Here's the point. This is not a guy that appeared, and I don't know his background, to be dangerous. This is not someone you commit. This is someone that you redirect, trust, compassion, figuring out where he's really from, what happened here. But I have met others who I am clear would meet these definitions. And but for the grace of God, I'm not injured. Now, remember why I'm not injured for getting out of the car. Because I'm surrounded by police officers. But what happens when a social worker just steps up? There is an intersection between folks who are on house who have no other place to go and folks who are released into a community. And these common sense solutions help us bridge the gaps, be smart. But I feel pretty confident I can help Maya.
And quickly,
Yep.
you think the majority of Democrats, enough to get a bill through, will support some kind of bill that compels people in certain circumstances?
Look, I think so, and I'm going to defer to the chairwoman. And can I share something that's a bit personal between you and me? Sure. Look, she's a skeptic, man. Okay? She drove me out of my mind up until the special session and beyond. She did all the work, and I mean no disrespect to the Senate and all the other legislators. It wasn't like you did that alone, but it takes a leader who says, okay, I'm a skeptic, and I'm not going to overreach in abridging somebody's constitutional rights on commitment. She was very clear to me about that. And I pushed back, and I was very clear. Nearly every other state has modernized that. You still have to meet the constitutional requirements. So we're soft pedaling it when we talk about balance, but least restrictive, when she talked about outpatient, that's required. And even if it wasn't required, my guess is an intellectual skeptic would have put it in there without a U.S. constitutional requirement. You don't abridge those rights. People do better when they agree to treatment and services. Fact. But there are people who can't agree, and I'm going to give the legislators, and I don't have it quite ready, but I have a really good case to show you where recently a judge did commit someone without these changes. Probably didn't have the right tools to do that. And I'm proud to say that the Behavioral Health Institute did right by that forensic commitment work. And the gentleman's now released and doing really well and is saying, I needed medication. I wasn't right, and I was going to kill someone or myself. And now I understand that. And those are the kinds of outcomes. Narrow, rare, targeted, but they exist. And we need, and then the compelling to outpatient. I'll use Madia, although I really, again, I'm not an expert, but in 15 minutes, and this is not a guy that appears to be a risk to himself or others. So none of those things would, and he doesn't, I don't know about his criminal background, but my guess is I'm not going to find a rich criminal background. I don't know, Morgan. But if he was in that revolving door, the right level of required treatment means he gets well. He can be a productive member of society. He has a place to get his Social Security disability check if he qualifies. You know, when you're on the streets, that's really hard to do. I'll have to get him a rep payee, which means he's going to have to agree to give up some of his civil rights. So they're doing, in my view, right now, some of the best work ever in behavioral health, healthcare access, meaningful consequences, being serious about criminal justice and public safety, and being compassionate. I couldn't ask for a better environment.
Representative Chandler, do you have
Is that
something?
all right?
I think the governor captured it. I would say, you know, we all are conscious of the fact, and I want to repeat something because I hear this somewhat from the disability rights folks. Voluntary treatment is, of course, the preferable approach. But I think we have to acknowledge that individuals with serious mental illness often, or at least sometimes, don't have the capacity to make, an informed, rational decision in that, to get themselves the help that they need. And I think we're all looking for avenues that will support them by giving them a push into the system so that they can get treatment and also resources. This is a multi-pronged approach. We're talking about expanding supportive resources, behavioral health resources, community-based resources. That's on another track that the legislature and the governor's working on. But that will complement these other efforts that we're working on that will, give those individuals who can't make the judgment themselves a little push into the system where I think they will benefit. And it really is something that we want to do out of compassion, and I think we all share that goal.
Let's go to Kara QE.
Hi, here to be here. Obviously, acknowledging everything you all discussed is of significant public interest when it comes to public safety, but I have to ask you about another layer of our public safety. We just saw the first person federally charged in the DWI corruption scheme. I want to ask you, Governor, knowing now that law enforcement officers in the state of New Mexico were conspiring with Defense Attorney's Office to get DWI cases dismissed, and that this went on for decades, what does that say to you about the state of public safety in New Mexico, and what do you say to people who might just lack faith in our criminal justice system at this point?
Well, don't lack faith. I mean, I'd love to say that there are no bad actors anywhere in any context, and I'm sure somewhere out there we've had a bad actor who was in the media. I don't know who that might be, but it's terrible. The confidence should be here. Report to the DOJ involving the FBI. I can tell you that we first learned, thanks to media reporting, that the FBI has indicated that there might be state police involvement. Swift and deliberate action. Once we know who those individuals are, swift, immediate, deliberate, and this. Given that we are learning how to collaborate better, I have a suggestion for all of us. Go back decades. Start looking at officers who didn't show up to cases. I think it's a pretty specific warning symptom. That's how you learn. Learn from mistakes that maybe we didn't do audits far enough. Maybe we didn't audit that in every, maybe DAs ought to be looking. Maybe PDs, we should be auditing failure to appear. Because if you do that, it's not going to root out, someone who intends to break the law will find a way. But we have to lean in when we have notice about what we can do to minimize that kind of bad, unacceptable behavior. And the fact that you're seeing swift action by these jurisdictions should tell the public we mean business.
Yeah, Mr. Cohen, the New Mexican.
Good morning, Governor, and to everyone else. We've heard over and over about this revolving door. We've heard it for years. How do you structure a pretrial detention bill that's both an effective tool and yet also satisfies the concerns that lawmakers have with changing that?
Well, that's a hard question. If I knew that, I'd have gotten it passed in 2020. This state, again, it's going to sound negative and I need help. I'm asking for help because that's not my intent for viewers and the public. That's not a helpful. And being negative, being angry are not good strategies. Being nervous in a movie theater is not a good strategy. But sometimes New Mexico is sort of behind the curve in evidence-based strategies. We're a small state, we may not see it in the same way, we have fewer police officers, we have fewer people, we have lots more rural communities. You know, it's like the reason that you go someplace else if you have a serious illness where doctors see that all the time and are embedded in research and they have thousands of patients instead of one. It's different here, so it's not a complaint. But we had a terrible, completely unjust system for criminal defense and criminal prosecution. If you were poor, you couldn't bond out, you sat in jail. Frankly, I'm willing to say right out loud, we probably rarely met the speedy trial requirements. All right, and poor people, what are they going to do about it? What's a brown or black or Native American 18 or 19-year-old man or woman going to do about that exactly? Nothing. So when Justice Daniels does exactly what we all do as leaders, shame on us, Good for him. It was a powerful, meaningful statement to get our act together and to stop discriminating against minorities and individuals who are poor in the criminal justice system. And voters resoundingly agreed that's wrong. And then, I think, kind of a vacuum. And then I'm going to say this is not the attitude of anyone. We have a tendency, particularly governors, we have these legacy things. Don't touch my legacy. I think maybe some of that in all of us got embedded in a way that we stopped thinking about, you have to right size it. I don't believe anyone intended for folks who cannot be released and need to be held accountable, that it wasn't going to apply in a meaningful way. There are tools that exist, other jurisdictions do it. Somehow we went, in my opinion, too far the other way. And other states started to make these adjustments to both their tools and their screening and their commitment and their competency laws, and we didn't. And this is an opportunity to get it all right. I think a lot of that is there. And I haven't really said that out loud. I'm glad that I got to vote on that constitutional amendment. We should not be having a two-party criminal justice system. One for people who are rich and one for people who are poor. And that was the right decision by New Mexico. Now we have an obligation to create the statutory structure that allows for solving the problems that exist and do it like some other states have. And that's why I like pretrial detention. It's very clear, it's the federal system, and it doesn't require the same kind of re-review, if you will, which we'll have to do on competency. No bond hold, you have to keep reviewing it. I like it because you're just sort of done. You follow the federal system, it's constitutional, it's not a two-party system. Poor people get the same swift, appropriate justice and defense as rich people do. I like that better. It requires less nibbling around the edges and less work for legislators, and clarity for the PDs and DAs. I don't know that I'm going to win it. That was your question, but I'm going to keep asking. That's my opinion. But I think that whole body, that this is a state that also, I'll do one more thing. I think I could speak for the bulk of legislators in this way. This is a proudly independent state. We don't have to be like everybody else. We like to make sure that we identify our populations in a way that's more perfected to who New Mexicans are. And that makes my job harder when I want a one-size-fits-all approach that I think simplifies this and reduces risk. I can respect the debate on the other side, but I'm going to keep pushing, Daniel.
Let's go there.
Jessica, what about QE? So we talked about, more consequences, especially for youth reform in the criminal system. But when we end up with just more teenagers, locked up, there's bills being proposed to address people with mental health issues and getting them the help that they need. But how we get youth the help that they need, especially when some of them might not struggle with mental health issues, but come from broken families, or as someone mentioned, might have an adult bad influence.
Yeah. Well, those detention placements have to include behavioral health, and I can tell you that I don't think the legislature would entertain not doing that. So we have a lot more evidence-based tools. We have a tendency to look back when we didn't have those, instead of looking forward, and now we do, and so we have to display them. If you don't do it, then you have teenagers who continue to get access to firearms and shoot people and themselves. Remember the accident where the two teenagers were passing a gun back and forth, and we have a death. Okay, and the other teenager will be forever broken. We also have monster drugs today that create very significant brain changes that are not so easy to address. And I hope in the near future, our professionals will find a way to interrupt that like they did with meth with the endorphins. They haven't quite done that with fentanyl. These breaks are significant and can create a very hostile and dangerous environment. We can do better by detention, but these kids have to have consequences. They will tell you. I mean, the DAs will tell you, and the police. There's nothing you can do to me. Go ahead. I have a stash, man. And so it's clear I'm in trouble. And I got marched right back there, and I had to give it back. I had to work an entire Saturday sweeping. If my parents could have gotten the store owner to make me wear like a T-shirt that said, I'm an offender, they would have. I mean, I was in a lot of trouble. I'm not suggesting that's the right thing to do for a kid or the right intervention. It was right for my parents. It was right for me. that I understood immediately that if my parents knew, I was going to be in trouble. I also knew that if I stole again, I could be charged, and my parents would let that happen. Kids don't think about that anymore. Don't have to go back to the 60s, but we can't ignore the present dangers. That's what we're doing today. Balanced, smart approaches that create accountability and safeguards. And if we do all of the above, I am confident we can see further productive impacts in our community.
We'll take a couple more. Griffin, Rushton.
Jumping off of that, I wanted to ask you about the role of illicit drugs. You know, we didn't really talk about it a lot earlier, but you know, with these increased punishments, the competency, with all these things you guys are putting on the table, can there be an effect if the illegal drug problem is not addressed?
I think we can have a significant impact, but you address a much larger, very complicated problem. This country has an incredible drug appetite, and we have very organized criminals from all around the globe who are very effective. They're already 30 years ahead of us. Fentanyl is going to be the old thing. There's going to be a new thing. Now, that's not to say that we should give up. But look, we have a serious issue. I could debate war on drugs doesn't work. Ignoring the drug epidemic also doesn't work. Again, I think there needs to be issues in between, and I'm all about making sure that drug dealers, cartels, organized crime, gangs, anybody profiting from fentanyl gets held accountable, which is why I like this bill very much. That if you're a drug dealer and someone dies of an overdose, you're being charged with murder. I think we have to do everything in our power to know as much as we can know and to solve these issues in as many ways as we can know, which is why New Mexico does school-based health centers and public health, and we're going to do more in behavioral health. It's going to require decades of all of the above. But drug use, and when fentanyl is pennies, it is really hard to combat, and we're all going to have to do a better job. Bad actors go to jail and then right to prison. And the victims should get treatment, and I need more prevention. Look, we're doing more for mid-schools. We've got lots of ideas about after-school programs. We're robustly leaning in on absenteeism. All of these things are reducing risk factors for young people to have, you know, sort of an impulsive response to alcohol and drugs. Do all of it. We absolutely have a serious fentanyl problem in this state.
We've got Dan Boyd, and the last question is Corey at KOH.
Anybody, I mean, help me, guys.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I wanted to ask kind of the law enforcement leaders, you know, when we talk about juvenile crime and all the other crimes you're seeing, you know, how much of that is connected to fentanyl and other drugs?
So I'll go first real quick. I'll kick it over to the aide. So for us, if you look at the, you know, one of the things I talked to DC Vega about, he's our investigations deputy chief. Earlier this week was, you know, what's driving some of these kids, and a lot of it is it's normalization of crime, right? So if you look and see, it's okay now to back in the day, you get in a fight, you get in a fight. Now they resort immediately just because of the access to firearms to pulling out a gun and shooting somebody. One, because there's no consequences behind it, but two, you know, you talk about fixing the kids. I mean, as law enforcement, we have training every day, every week, every month. We have biennium training. We have all kinds of training, but we arrest these useful offenders, but we don't give them the proper training to go back. And if you have somebody who's been arrested for a violent crime and then you just kick them back out, cool. What'd you do to fix it? But for the fentanyl issues we've been having, so, you know, just a case in point, we had one the other day where I think it was a large federal amount of fentanyl. And back in the day, you look at that and go, holy moly, that's huge. And now it's like, you know, that's nothing. And I think that the normalization of some of that stuff is what's kind of creating these effects where, yeah, these kids don't care because it's normal. And we got to get back to where there's consequences to it, but also, how do you retrain their minds to make sure that that's not normal? Like, you have a truck full of fentanyl, that ain't normal. Where did it come from? You know?
Smoking fentanyl in the streets openly is a
Yeah.
real indication that people don't believe there are any consequences, and that's now normalized statewide. It's statewide. I've seen it in every single community. I just saw it Sunday in Espanola at the Starbucks. And again, I report.
I would just say, just to add on very quickly, juvenile crime, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time when it comes to juvenile crime. We can give the necessary behavioral health, family intervention type treatment, and at the same time, we can also have consequences. It does not have to be an either or an or, that it can be both. Second of all, fentanyl. By far the worst drug that I've ever seen in my lifetime, and probably everybody sitting at this table. It is horrific. Too many New Mexicans die from it. We are attacking it, and I think it's the right attack. Again, on both sides. We're going after drug traffickers. We've got 400 open cases of drug trafficking in our office. At the same time, we understand that some people would not even be in the criminal justice system if it were not for their fentanyl addiction. So we try to get them the necessary help they need. So again, we can do both things. We can go after the POSs who put that poison on the streets, and at the same time, we can get the help to people who are just addicted. Again, we can do both.
I always thought POS was point of sale, but I think
That's what I meant.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's good to see you all. I'll try and be brief. I wanted to ask, I know that the school of thought a little bit on some legislators, and I won't name names, but that we don't back laws on the books, and that it's more of an issue of enforcing the laws that are already on the books, and wanted to get anyone's thoughts and if you think there's any truth to that.
I don't. I get challenged, and that's their job, make sure that I can describe some of these proposals. And I remember at one town hall, a legislator said, well, we've, changed felony definitions a ton of times, but if you don't sentence based on those laws and it's discretionary, you can change them all you want. It's not a failure in making the laws accountable. You said somebody else could decide. And there's a lot of public pressure to decide in the opposite way. Structure, standardize, create the right expectations. And quite frankly, even if that was true, you have a crisis. You better do everything in your power to address the crisis. Otherwise, I don't know how you look families in the eye. When I meet with the feds, 1,000% of the time, they say, look, we don't even, we need you to prosecute some crimes. We'll prosecute some crimes. You guys have the weakest laws in the country. You heard that? Heard that? Heard that? I'm telling you. Even if it's not true, the perception is we don't do right by holding people accountable. And in many times it's true, which is why we have a human trafficking proposal in the legislature. We didn't do it. We swung one way, too long. We swung the other way. This is the session of common sense, practical, smart, evidence-based solutions to addressing and frontward-facing. We have a public safety crisis in this state at all levels. And we're going to go after addressing it in every possible way. And I've been acknowledging, as I should, that is my job. I'm not going to agree with every proposal. I'm not going to agree with every legislator. And God knows they are free, and you can see it, at disagreeing with me on any number of things. That's a democracy. That's a debate in action. That's the way it's supposed to work between an executive and a legislative and judicial branch. We figure it out. But look, they've committed, and I applaud them. They don't need me for that. They said, we're going to look at the early number. So for New Mexicans, the earlier the number, that's the priority of that particular piece of legislation. It's a commitment by both chambers, by both parties. Get bills up to me right away. We're talking about the potential of an omnibus public safety package getting up here before the midway point in the legislature. You tell me the last time that happened for any governor. We just didn't do it. For the last governor, there was a fight about no prevention versus only crime. For the governor before that, same kind of thing. I mean, this is the first balanced effort, and it took all of us to get here. I appreciate it. We're just going to get a lot done this session, and I wish I could answer exactly what it is. They're hearing from the public, and they're hearing from experts, and but I feel pretty confident. We are further along than I think they've ever been on a robust package, and I've been working with the legislature for about 40 years.
Last question, Corey McKay, chief please.
Governor, when it comes to crime, we talked about a variety of issues. Are there any bills that stand out to you that could be a potential fix to those problems? If so, what are they?
Well, you've heard about a bunch of them, right? So the competency and commitment as a restatement is really critical to making sure that people who are a danger to themselves and others have a tool to get competency restored by getting the right services through a commitment of least restrictive means. That's really critical. Competency, changing the law so that judges have the tools to be able to restore criminal and civil competency so that you can adjudicate something without just releasing someone, that gets fixed. I really want felon in possession. We're seeing far too many folks reoffend. If you look at the data, it is really strikingly clear. The vast majority of folks in 5 years out have a gun in minutes and reoffend, and someone often dies in that recommitment of that offense. It makes no sense to me, and they know that they're right back out, and so it just sort of creates this presumption of, you're not gonna be held accountable, not really, so go ahead. I think the murder charges for drug trafficking resulting in a death is powerful. I think the racketeering bill is powerful. I think the human trafficking bill has we got a big problem around this country and right here in New Mexico with human trafficking. We need to be able to prosecute it and put those bad actors in prison for a very long time. I think that the juvenile justice work and changes to the criminal code, we've shown that it works. Can you imagine if we had 343 individuals still shooting people in the state, in their teens? How many of you want your kids going to school with that juvenile offender? Raise your hand. You know, I'm gonna steal his thunder. D.A. Bregman's got a group of kids, and if you all remember, we talked about our last big public safety package at West Mesa High School. Because kids have had enough. Kids in schools know who these kids are. Now, I'm not saying that you should be able to, get on social media and tell the DA to prosecute your classmate who didn't ask you to homecoming. Otherwise, I'd have been prosecuting a lot of people all through my high school. But they know when there's risk, and they know when someone's been arrested because they see it on social media. These kids post, and will sell you a gun. They post themselves shooting up things, shooting at people. They post it. These kids know. They know who to stay away from. What kind of an environment is that? Where we're sending our kids to schools where they know they're terrified of other kids in the classroom. Now, where those kids don't go, but they're around the school. They're there when you go to your car. They're there when you go to the Burger King. They follow you. They know. Can't have a birthday party for your 16-year-old because you don't know who might come. That's wrong. Balance. Those changes for detention are critical. And I could give you a whole bunch more. The changes to the extreme risk protection order, I have to say this is the first time, thank you, I mean no disrespect. But it takes us all a long time to get to the same place because we're all looking at it from different perspectives. That's our job. I'm hearing from sheriffs all across the state and under sheriffs. They want to be able to report so that they can be part of that extreme risk protection order. They want to take these guns into custody. And I will tell you that in 2019, zero sheriffs and maybe one police chief, and now it's fairly universal. I can't say it's every police jurisdiction, but in every community we've had a town hall, I've had a sheriff or a deputy sheriff saying, we need to do more with that. That's a huge shift. People's minds are changing. We're all coming to the table about the tools. That's another one. And I could give you 20 more. Why don't I give you the entire list of bills I'd like to see the legislature pass? And they have many of their own that I think have real merit. It doesn't need me to have an idea. They know these guys have real expertise.
Governor, may I ask one last question?
I don't know, ask Michael.
May I ask one last question, please?
One more.
Crime is not a new problem in New Mexico. Do you think that you waited too long to wrap up the pressure
do not. I asked them to take action in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23. I called the special section, don't be mad still. But look, whatever time it takes, it takes. Here's something else that I need to say. They did not send me criminal justice bills. Every single year I can point to a bill I've signed, including lots of gun legislation that there was not always bipartisan agreement on. They got upstairs. So this notion, and maybe I make it sound too one-sided, that policymakers just didn't want to do this. That's not true. But figuring out when we had a decimated behavioral health system, when we had issues attracting providers, when we had COVID, we were like COVID extreme state. We don't have hospital beds, we have the sickest population, the poorest population in the country, the largest independent number of tribes, some of them of pueblos have 300 people. COVID gets in, you lose an entire race. Then we had fires. We led the country with hideous climate change fires. Now, we didn't even need any help starting. The feds started it for us, okay? So we were, we took care of New Mexicans where they were without ignoring crime. Sometimes we need a moment where all those other crises do not take center stage, and we can really robustly have a continuum. Maybe the benefit of those debates for those years allows New Mexico not to nibble again at the edges and do one or another, but an omnibus package, which we haven't done, I don't think, in decades. You know what? I'll take that 1,000% of the time, because that will erode this crisis and do something about it faster than one or two pieces of legislation at a time. So I'm going to do this. I congratulate the legislators for doing the heavy lifting to get where they are today.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks, everybody, for coming today.
Thank you all.